in the future, and I think this is a true statement for forever, the people that will succeed are the people that are most willing to accept change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think about that all the time when we get different things that we have to, even if I don't think it's going to be something that's going to, I'm like, I got to change.
All right, folks, welcome to the Entre podcast, episode 4 with a legend today. Today, we're going to have Tim Knesek with Capital Farm Credit here on the podcast. And Tim has been a legend in the capital farm industry. And I went to bed dreaming about this last night, excited about this podcast. And today, I think we're going to learn a lot about a 40-year career now at Capital Farm.
38 and a half
38
right
and a
now,
half.
but pretty darn close to, if you're round, it's 40.
What's amazing to me is that a lot of people can stay excited for maybe a month.
Mm-hmm.
Some can, most probably stay excited about something for maybe a week and then they give up.
Mm-hmm.
But the people like you that stay excited for 38 plus 40 years, however long it takes to get to where you are and what you've done, that's tenacity, and it's all this. So today I want to dive into that. What does that look like? Because you don't see that a lot in this world. And so really want to dive into who you are, how you've done this, and talk about some things too. I Googled your name Monday on the 5th of May, Cinco de Mayo, and I just was like, I got to get ready for this with Tim on Friday. And I Googled your name, and sure enough, it was in globalnewswire.com. Capital Farm Credit names Tim Knesek, president of South Texas region. And so you're, still growing at 38 plus years, doing things for the company and all this.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's talk about how to become a legend like you today, Tim. So if you're listening to this, stay tuned, stay with us, because we're gonna learn a lot today. I really want to know who you are. I hired a business coach when COVID was ended and rates went from 3 to 8%. And I hired a business coach to help our team. We met on a Zoom meeting, and it was all about business by referrals and all this.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we dove in, he asked us a question. He came to me first. He's like, "Who's Chip Bubella?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a real estate broker. I got 20 agents, and all this." He's like, "No, I want to know who Chip Bubella is. Is he a dad? Is he a husband? All those things." So who is Tim Knesek?
Yeah, well, I've got a lot to thank my parents for. I had 2 parents that couldn't be more different, but had a commitment to us kids to make us better and provide for us and so forth. So I was very fortunate to have that to start off. My dad, he was a guy that would work long hours to support our family. He was in the drywall business and construction, and he worked well into his 70s.
Where was this at?
He started in Houston for about 20 years, and then we moved back to the farm north of Lake Somerville there in Burleson County.
Okay.
And so I was raised there on the farm, and I got to watch all the city kids go by to go to the lake in the summer while I had to work out on the ranch. So that's kind of how it started out. But when your parents are in the ranching business and in construction, there's not really a lot of time to be lazy.
Yeah.
And so I was taught to work, and it was just kind of bred into me. I think it was genetic, but I get a lot of reward from work. And I think that I'll always have a job. Yeah. I just don't think I'll ever retire. Yeah. In fact, when I get to the end here in a few years, I'm going to graduate. I'm going to graduate into another part of life.
Yeah.
So that's where my work ethic came from, and my desire. And probably you talk about good days and bad days. I saw my dad get up in good days and bad days, and he went and did the same thing, and he was consistent at delivering a quality product, regardless of where our family was in our life. And I saw that, and I've always tried to model that. And so that's probably where I get that from. My mother, at 85 years old, is probably going to hospitals today to visit people.
Wow. She's 85, you said?
She's 85 years old. She drives herself. And she's probably going to a church meeting while she's listening to this because she said, I want to hear it, when it gets done.
Awesome.
But she has always had other people first in her life in what she's taken care of people. Mm-hmm. She's helped the elderly or anybody that was in need. And so I think, as I pursued my career, I wanted to be able to help people. Mm-hmm. And because I saw that in her, and she instilled that in our Christian values that we have. And so there was always that purpose to try to solve somebody's problems, make their life better.
Yeah.
And then you combine that with the fact that when I grew up in Houston, when I was 7 years old, we moved to the country. But I'm telling you, for those 7 years, when I learned how to cry, I cried when we had to go back to the city because I didn't like it.
Right.
I wanted to grow up in the country. And at 7 years old, my dream came true.
Yeah.
And so I love the rural area. And I love rural Texas. And I've got one daughter in New York City with her husband and one in the Heights in Houston with their kids. I raised them in the country, though.
Yeah.
They know what it's like, so they'll probably come back one day. But I had a career, especially this last 30 years that I've been over in the LaGrange office, and having Houston and Austin beside me. Mm-hmm. And you have the same thing when you bring people in. Folks come to you and they want what we have.
Yeah.
They want to, you can make a living in concrete.
Yeah.
But by golly, if you can come out here and you can shred 10 acres,
and
at the end of the day, you can look at it and you can see that you've actually accomplished something.
Yeah.
And it's not on paper, it's something like that. People yearn for that. I think that's a genetic thing that we get from generations ago, to be able to turn back and actually see what we've done that day and declared a good day. In fact, I always say that I'm a rancher on Saturdays typically, and Saturday night I sleep the best. Not just because I work hard on the farm, but because when I go to sleep at night, mm-hmm. I'm looking at the field that I shredded or the cattle that I fed or something like that. And I think those people that live in the city, they want that same feeling, and they get it when they come out here and buy properties from you and let us finance them and get them out here so that they can enjoy what we enjoy every day.
Right.
Yeah.
That's I love that. So many thoughts are going through my head with that. We hosted a class yesterday, a farm ranch contracts course at the office, and we had a city guy teaching this course. Yeah. So we kind of knew more than he did about the farm life and stuff. And so as he's teaching, he's like, man, I'm curious, I probably want that too. Like, mm-hmm. He didn't even know that. He kind of talked himself into buying a piece of property, I think.
Yeah. Well, you accomplished the goal there.
Yeah.
I will say too, and because this kind of leads into what motivates me. When I was early in my career, and I got out, I thought that I wanted to be the CEO of the organization. Whatever I was going to do, I wanted to rise to the top of it. And that was I guess that was a good goal at the time. It motivated me.
Yeah.
I went out and got as much business as I could get. And it's a great way to get seen when you're young, to be able to be the most productive that you could be. I learned later in my career, and I'll tell you when this happened, that there's other platforms that you can put yourself on that you can accomplish your goal. And you just have to have a vision of what that looks like. Yeah. And it doesn't always have to be the top of the organization. You just have to, it's not the best title. It's do you have the influence?
Yeah.
Your message that you want to bring, do you have an opportunity to have that influence and be able to touch people with it? And so that's where I changed from, well, you know what? I don't really have to have the title. I just have to have the platform.
Yeah.
And so that's and so my first get this, for the first 24 years, I was adding these years up the other day as I think about where my career is. For 24 years, I led one office, and a lot of that time I had just one person with me, and I was doing business.
Yeah.
And I always thought that I had more to offer, to our employees and our organization by working with. And so I would train. I would get myself on committees.
Yeah.
I would train. And I trained with a lot of people that managed a lot of folks within our organization. But I only went back home and I managed one.
Yeah.
And 24 years is like a career to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I maintained my focus. And I did that by leading from the middle.
Yeah.
I always believed in leading from the middle. And I help our young people that find themselves in this position where I want to be boss one day. Well, I don't know when that's going to happen, but I can prepare you and offer you things that allow you to practice those skills until that comes up.
Yeah.
And for me, it was 24 years.
Yeah.
And then for a period of time, I led a couple of offices, but then I finally got a chance, and at year 30 in my career, after 30 years, I went to lead in this. So this would be the last 8 years. I led 3 offices. Then because of reorganization, I led 1. Then I led 16. Then I led 20. And now I'm back down, fixing to be down to 8. And through all of that, you think, oh, well, your numbers are going backward. No, my platform is getting better, actually.
Yeah.
But I had to be patient, and I had to find where that place was in my career and where it was in the organization. And I tell you, when I look back, I think it was all. I think all that time was right for me.
Yeah.
I think if I would have fell into some of those other jobs, I've applied for 6 in my life and I've gotten 3.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about those 3 I didn't get. I learned that I probably wouldn't have been the best move for me. So a lot of things kind of happened for me to kind of get me from where I started to where I am today.
So your background growing up with your parents is a lot like mine. My dad, every day he had to do something productive. And so I remember, I think the A&M Texas game used to be on a Friday back in the day after Thanksgiving.
I just saw that on the TV this morning. Yeah, it used to be on a Friday.
And my friends would always get to go watch that game. I had to go to work.
Oh, yeah. You know what Labor Day was for? My dad told me Labor Day
I
was
used to be so mad at my dad. He'd make me work while everybody was watching that game. And I was like, oh. But, I look back and I always knew how to work like you. I could always do something. I feel, if I'm not productive that day, I don't feel right.
Yeah, I know. And I know a lot of people listening to this love to go and lay on the beach and enjoy that. But if I don't have a book to read or do something productive, it just drives me crazy. Yeah. And, my wife, she says I should relax a little bit more, but I don't know. I'm just not wired like that.
Yeah, I'm not either. I know if I'm laying down or being lazy, I'm like, what are you doing productive today? I can hear my dad, what are you doing that's productive today, son? It's just ingrained.
Yeah, well, so many of the things that we the reason we are like we are, is because of what we learned when we were young.
And I'm just thankful for that. You're mad at your dad at the time, but then you look back, you're like, thank you.
Yeah.
I needed that.
Yeah.
So we talked about who Tim is, and thank you for sharing your background and the story about your parents and your daughters. I'm a girl dad too.
Yeah.
And so, but somebody told me one time, I guess they apply to girls too, but they said a country boy can make it in the city, but a city boy can't make it in the country. So I'm sure your girls are doing great in the city because they were raised in the country.
Yeah. In fact, there's a funny story there. My one daughter works for a major news organization in New York City. And when she interned with them, they said they were telling them about shooting with the camera. And they said, it's kind of like shooting with a gun. And they said, have any of you ever shot a gun? And my daughter says she looked around and there's a lot of East Coast people there, and she like raised her hand. She said she was the only one. But I taught them how to shoot guns, so
That's good.
they can do what they need to.
Love it. And just before we get started, Tim, not before we get started, before we go on, Tim and I did a radio show on KVLG, K-Book LaGrange. I don't know, it's probably 12 years ago when I first got started. But for the camera purposes, there we are. I think we look younger than we did 12 years ago, Tim.
I think I've got more hair now. No, I'm kidding.
We've aged well. But, I remember when Jody Siptek, and I kept asking Jody, Jody's done her own deal now, own brokerage, but I asked Jody, she was in the Flatonia office, and I said, I need some people to interview for the radio show. I need new guests. She's like, you need to call Tim Knesek. I think y'all would be a great fit for each other. So, that was the first time I met you. And now we are today doing a podcast together.
That's good advice, because we always enjoy our conversation together.
Yeah.
Chip, we really do.
I know. And so, okay, we're talking about your career. And I want to talk about, John Maxwell has a quote, and it says, two things first off. I want to talk about this quote, but I also want to talk about success versus significance. Success is when you add value to yourself, and significance is when you add value to others. I think we all strive and want to live a significant life. Mm-hmm. That's how you live a legendary life, I feel like. Mm-hmm. And so you've done that. And I want to dive into, you were in production, right? Mm-hmm. And then you were able to transition into the more significant role, which is adding value to other people instead of to yourself. Mm-hmm. How did you make that transition, or what was it? A light bulb that went off? I'm ready to move on to the next phase. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like?
Yeah. So we went. I went into management training. Basically, I think it was in 2006.
Okay.
And I was in it for 18 months, and then I had about a year break, and I had another 18 months. I remember the second phase that we went through. The meeting was in New York, and they were like a week at a time, every 6 months, and we just gone through the financial meltdown.
Oh wow!
And
that was 2008, you said, right?
Yeah. And we went, and one of our brokers there was a trading floor for Bank of America.
Okay.
And I remember going there and thinking, wow, this is a pivotal moment that I'm here in history. And so anyway, that's I think probably because of some of that management training that I have is pretty intense. First, it allowed me to discover who I was. Mm-hmm. And so that first year and a half, and I think it's real important to understand who you are. Mainly because you can, and there's of course books all about this, about discovering your strengths and weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And I always, I guess, I don't know if I should say felt ashamed, but I always maybe tried to hide my weaknesses or something, or just didn't want to talk about them, Mm-hmm. But we all have things that we're good at and we're not as good at, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it got me really comfortable during that time to say, those people that I wound up hiring, I didn't really realize this, but they have the strengths that complement my weaknesses.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about that when I'd hired up to that point, mm-hmm. but that's what I was doing, is hiring my weaknesses, which were their strengths. And it made me appreciate, the teamwork a lot more. And so that first phase of that was to discover, yourself and what you're good at, and better prepare you for teamwork. Yeah. And so the second phase was about leading teams.
Okay.
And how you work with other people. Who taught this,
by the way? What other program was it?
So Farm Credit Council Services actually does this on a national basis. Okay. There are outside people outside of Farm Credit that can come in and be part of these classes. Yeah. But they have a really good, and so they bring in, like, we would meet 3 to 4 days during the week. We'd have a couple of travel days because it was always a pretty neat area to go to. And they would bring in, so every day you'd have a different instructor, sometimes 2 a day. And they would bring them in and they would talk about things like emotional intelligence, just different things. And at that point, I really never knew that much about
emotional intelligence,
how important that was when you get into leadership, and make sure that, when the rockets are going off, that you maintain that. And I started seeing that in leaders too. and how they practice that. So that it was a very high quality, and it was a big investment for the organization to do that. And I'm privileged to work for an organization, all these years that could build those kind of values in us. And so the leading teams is that second. We had to have a project. And I know we've talked about this before. One of the things that I'm probably most proud of in the organization is the mentoring program that we have. And so Alan Hornig's one of my cohorts, and he and I led a team that worked on a project to set up a mentoring program.
Okay.
And we have 600 employees in the first years. This started in about 2010, 2011. And we would have maybe 10 employees maybe involved in it, 10 mentees, 10 mentors. And we just finished probably about the 7th or 8th class that we had, and we had 107 in it.
Wow.
And we should have had about 140, but it's hard. It's harder to find mentors than it is mentees.
Yeah.
And so we had some other training we were doing with the other ones, but yeah, we had 107 in it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of people that we touched.
You're talking about emotional intelligence. Henry Ford once said, I wanted to hire just your 2 hands and I got the whole thing.
Yeah.
I just want your 2 hands. I didn't want all this that comes with you, your bad, stressful life at home. I didn't want that,
Yeah.
But when we do hire people, we do get the whole package. And that's where that emotional intelligence comes in. And we have to learn to listen to people and understand what they're going through, and at the same time leading them and all that. So it's important to understand that, like you say.
So I've got a pretty good analogy that you can relate to on that. I said, the good Lord blessed me with daughters.
Yeah.
And
that's true.
and so I've been through 12 cheerleader tryouts.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I've been through 2 weddings that I just never thought I would agree to something like that.
Yeah.
And so I've been through a lot of things like that.
Yes.
And so in fact, yesterday, I was speaking to our board. I told you that before we started, and I kind of walked when I went down to South Texas. There was a lot of uncertainty with the ag economy down there and so forth, and so I was looking for a metaphor for a slide.
Yeah.
When I present, I love to put a picture up there and just talk through it, and apply it to whatever. And so I couldn't get this slide of kind of coming in and calming a storm or rallying the troops or anything like that. So I put it out there to my daughter and one of the other ladies, and I said, "Hey, what do you give me some ideas? I'm struggling with this slide."
Yeah.
And so they said, it could be like Jesus calming the storm. I said, well, I can't compare myself to Jesus. I can't do that. And they said, and another one said, well, what about like the king on a horse rallying the troops? And I said, well, I'm not really a dictator. That's not the kind of leader I am. But I appreciate, what they were trying to do for me. And I settled on a picture of Chicken Little.
Okay.
And the caption was the sky ain't a falling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the message when I walked down there and started helping people. I said, look, the sky ain't a falling.
Right.
We'll be fine.
Yeah.
We're going to be here. We're going to work through this and so forth. So anyway,
that's great.
I thought that was kind of funny because we just kind of went through and delivered that message yesterday.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Okay, so we talk about the significance and having those trainings, right, that helped you in management and prepare for that. And so you said something too. I keep diverting off because you keep saying things that I want to know, but I've always tried to figure out what my unique ability is.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what do you feel like is your unique ability? Because you talk about your weaknesses, right? But what's your unique ability that you have that you bring to the table? You feel like?
Yeah, I think I have an ability to connect with people, and I think the reason that people connect with me is I think it comes back from my mother's side. If you have an issue, I want to help you solve it. Mm-hmm. I guess I get emotional highs from seeing people that come to me with an issue, and seeing them leave with answers, or at least a direction where they can find that answer. And I think I kind of possess that skill, and it just comes from helping people accomplish their goals. I think that's
so you're a connector. You're good at connecting with people.
Yeah.
Very good. I like that. Actually,
in my predictive index, I'm a persuader.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess that fits in there somewhere.
Okay. So we talked about influence. We talked about leading a significant life and adding value to people. So success is knowing your purpose in life. And like, what do you think your purpose was? It doesn't have to be career goal, but everybody has a purpose. Like, what are I guess your purpose would be like you said, you're a connector, right? You've been really good at that.
Yeah. And as I've kind of lived this, and if there's any college graduates out there, maybe you'll benefit from this. Because we just went to a graduation party last night there in Bryan College Station for one of our friends' daughters. I think that I've always thought that God led my life, and I think He led me to Farm Credit. There were other places that I interviewed in December of 1986. It was like Texas was shut down. The economy was terrible.
Saving loans crisis, all that probably back then.
Yeah. And so that's and we could talk a lot about that, but all I wanted to do, I was a young married man. I got my wife and I got married right in the middle of my master's program that I was working in. Times were so tough, and I'm like, hey, we're fixing to hit the road. And I went through a third interview with Cargill Feeds, and they called me 2 days after Christmas, and they said, we don't want to hire you. And I was like, I'd already bought my wife a wool coat, right? And we're living in Texas, and I bought her a wool coat because I thought I was going to be in the Midwest or Minnesota or someplace where they have all their facilities. And I never really understood why they didn't hire me. And I'm going to finish the story in a second because it's just got a big turn to it. And so luckily a day later, a guy named Galen Elke called me from Kennedy, Texas. And that was before, we had phones and we could, had maps. So we had maps back then, right? And so I had no idea where that was. And I'm like, yes, I'm ready to go because I had I had my wife to take care of. She was still in school and I needed a job. And the work ethic that I have, so I got to have a job, right? And I was not going to stay and get just some kind of job. I was going to go wherever in the world I needed to go get a job. It's Kennedy, Texas. Show up for the interview Monday morning by the Walmart in Kennedy, Texas. So I got the map out and I started looking. I said, I really don't want to be in West Texas. So I looked in West Texas first and there was no Kennedy there. I said, that's good. And then finally I went around the whole map and I get to South Texas. I push up and it's about an hour south of San Antonio. And I said, well, I think that'll work. But what's my wife going to do with her coat? But fast forward about 20 years went by, and my boss said, Tim, why don't you go visit with the guy? He's working over at the granary for Cargill Feeds. I met him. We received an award over at A&M, and I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I had an intern with me. We showed up there at 4:00 on a Friday. I sat there and looked at that guy, and it was 5 minutes into our conversation. I said, were you the youngest district director or whatever he was for Cargill Feeds in December of 1986 in Fort Worth, Texas? And he goes, yes, I was. I said, you interviewed me for a job and you were my second interview and you sent me to Minnesota and they didn't hire me. And I want to know why.
Did you ever figure out why? No.
Yes. He sat there and thought, he said, those were very difficult times for our company. And I said, yeah. I said, it was terrible times. And he said, do you know after Christmas we canceled our training program? Oh, wow. I said, well, it would have been nice to know 20 years ago. That's why you didn't hire me. And so anyway, he said, Capital Farm Credit's a great a great organization because he was one of our borrowers. And he said Cargill is too. He said there's a few, and I tell our interns this because when we bring our interns in, we hire about a third of them.
Okay.
For one reason or another, they're usually 80% are really high quality but the positions aren't open at certain times and stuff like that. And he said, Cargill and Capital are not the only great organizations to work for, but they're unique.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to go to an organization that's going to grow you and make you who you want to be,
mm-hmm.
you've got to find one of those organizations.
Sure.
And so that would be my advice, I think, for all you graduates out there, is that you want to try to find that organization that's going to make you a better of who you are. So,
yeah, absolutely. So important. I know finding that mentorship, that all that stuff that goes into it. I know Capital Farm is a great organization for sure.
Yeah, I think there was one of my buddies one time told me, Clay Morgan, he's a good friend of mine, and does some. And we've been in business with some stuff and everything that we do some business together. And he told me, he goes, those Trammell Crow guys, and Trammell Crow got bought out by somebody, but this was back a few years ago. He said those guys. He said everybody wants to hire them. They're always smart. They're always really good. Yeah. And I'm like, then I thought about that, and I said, I want people to talk about Capital Farm Credit's people like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so that always kind of stuck in my mind, that there's companies that people say, I like the people that work for that company. Mm-hmm. And so that's always what I've strived for through like the mentoring, the intern, all that stuff, and building leadership in people is I want our people, I don't want to lose them, but I want them to be sought after as industry.
Why would you not make a good fit at Capital? Say you're graduating. Why would you not make a good fit at Capital Farm, you think?
Hey, if you're lazy.
Well, there you go. If you're lazy, you're not going to fit.
Yeah. I think, I think we have a real commitment to rural America.
Yeah.
And I think the people that have that connection, we employ quite a few folks that never have grown up probably in rural America, but once they kind of learn what we do, the mission we have to serve that part, it's just the city is fine, and a lot of our customers come out of there. But I just really, when I wake up, I look outside and the sun's not up yet, but when I get back to my house, I have a very calm and peaceful environment that this morning I looked out the window and there's darn deer in my yard again, eating my plants and stuff. And I wish everybody could wake up like that and see things like that.
I know. Yeah. I know. They don't know what they're missing, right?
Yeah. But you know what? We can fix them up. We can get them over here.
Absolutely. That's what, we don't want to, what's the saying? You bring too many of them. They love it to death. So, okay, keep things going. We got some more things to talk about. Your purpose, and now you're growing to your maximum potential through this. Because you stayed excited for however long it took to get to where you are today. And you probably had, what does a bad day look like for you, maybe?
I can remember sometimes, we have to deliver hard news.
Yeah.
And sometimes, occasionally, there have been an employee that we got to do some work with and so forth. And, you kind of have to change people's worlds a little bit. And so those are difficult things. And in the early years, I probably struggled with them more. But when you have to deliver bad news, it's just something that I try to do. I try to be sympathetic about it because and respectful to people. But I try to explain why, we have to do what we do. And this could be with a customer. It could be with an employee.
Yeah.
It could be with a realtor,
Yeah.
But hopefully, we've done everything right according to what we need to do. And then we just need to, communicate it. I tell you, the worst thing somebody can do with bad news is sit on it.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing somebody can do with it. And in the early days, I probably, didn't deliver a piece of news for a day or two to get my nerve up to do it. But I've learned, when you have bad news, you need to share it as quick as possible.
I know John Maxwell says, if you're in leadership, if you have 2 good days in a row, you're doing pretty good, because usually something's right around the corner you got to take care of and you got to deal with.
Yeah. So this is kind of funny, now that I deal with a lot of folks and stuff. Do you watch Landman?
Yeah.
So I always tell my wife, she goes, "How's your day?" I said, "Well, kind of like Tommy Norris. Things blow up." And I said, "But I'm not, I'm not saying anything about the family. I'm just saying things blow up." and I think, but the problems don't get to me until they're pretty difficult.
Yeah. Because
the people, I have a group of folks that are in management that answer to me, and if it's a simple answer or whatever, they take care of all those. So like probably with you, by the time they get to me, they get difficult. When they get to my boss, they're even more difficult. So we have to make some difficult decisions. But one thing I wanted to try to mention is that we've got a set of core values that we have in Capital Farm Credit, and they were developed in the early 2000s, and it wasn't because people sat down in a room and actually tried to come up with them. These were things that made us successful.
Over time.
And its commitment. We knew we had to be committed to our employees, committed to our customers. We had to bring value, because if you don't bring value to them, what's the purpose, right? If you can't add value every day. And in the financial business, probably the biggest one is trust, and to have a trusted relationship. And we strive to be a trusted advisor. And really in life, you should be the kind of person that somebody comes and talks to, and and you can engage and try to solve issues and so forth. So that being, that trusted advisor. So trust is the other one. And the fourth one is the one that I always ask the interns, and I ask our new hirees, because I talk to both groups, which one sticks out to you? The fourth one is family. And inevitably, when I ask that question, they'll say it's family. I said, that's exactly right. Because to get in that family and stay in that family, you got to stay committed. You got to continue to bring value. And you got to be a trusted individual.
Everything, it's worthwhile, right? Everything that's worthwhile in life is uphill, and so So that drives. You talk about a bad day and stuff like that. As long as you follow those kind of principles, and I think Capital was very smart by employing those. And like I said, they didn't just come off. They just didn't open up a book and find 4 words. Those were things that made us successful up to that point. And that's to stay consistent through, when I started, it was 8 people with managing $100 million a loan volume. And now we are 600 people in this organization managing about $16 billion with a B. And so through that whole transition, we've been able to stick with those core values. We run on EOS. We come up with our core values. I guess right after COVID, we did a deal. And I want to take note on this. I want to go back and look at the past 15 years we've been in business and seeing what made us successful. I want to redo that, because I like that how y'all went back through time. And we are where we are today because of these. It just didn't come up with something. You looked at the past to figure out where you are today and what got you there.
So
that's neat.
And I like to look at, I like to look at the core values of organizations, and But sometimes I'll give you an example of sometimes how people have them, but they don't. They have things in the organization, but they really don't use them, deploy them. They just kind of fill out the little objective, or whatever. When we started the mentoring program, I went to 4 different associations throughout the United States, and Farm Credits kind of share a lot of stuff. And there were 4 of them that were recommended to me that were really good. So I went and interviewed each one of them, and one of them was in the Northeast, I remember. And so anyway, fast forward a few years, I was asked to speak at a conference about mentoring, and I said. And they said, "Well, how did you come up with the program, Tim?" And I said, "Well, these 4 associations, were instrumental in me learning about this, and they were recommended as the number 1 programs out there. And it just so happened that Eastern Association was there, and the guy that was interviewing me, he knew that, and he goes, how's y'all's program doing?" And the lady said, "We didn't even know we had one."
Yeah.
And so it's just an example of how you can have those things, but if you don't live them, right?
Yeah.
Why have them?
Right. Absolutely.
So we preach them.
Yeah.
We preach them pretty hard and wear them on our sleeves. So
yeah. I love it. And I'm listening to you as we're going through this interview podcast with you, Tim, and I feel like Capital Farm. We talked about. I feel like Capital Farm is just a really great organization. You fit in that world, and you just were able to. You had the mentorship for yourself. You able to learn all these things, and you kept. It was a growth-oriented organization because you were able to grow alongside Capital Farm right through the time.
Yeah, the crazy thing is that Farm Credit's been around since I think it was originated under Wilson in 1916, but it actually started business, I think, in 17. And I think that 38 years, I think I went back and looked, and I think I've been working for Farm Credit more than a third of the time that it's been in existence. So. That really makes me sound old.
What's different from when you first started to where it is today? What's the biggest difference? Is it and I'm sure it's the amount of people too, but what do you think is the biggest difference?
Well, technology.
Yeah.
And man, we could talk about AI, but we probably don't have an afternoon session.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget the time that we were there. I walked in and they had manual typewriter and electric one. I said, "I'll take electric one."
Yeah.
When I got through college, we were already working on some computers, but there wasn't a such thing as Al Gore had not invented the internet yet or anything. And so we were sitting there one morning, and I tell this as a technology joke all the time, these folks, these young ones that come in, and we opened the mail together.
Yeah.
Because that's how we communicated, up and down this mail. And so my boss, he looked at this letter and he goes, "They're sending something called a facsimile machine." And we're like, "What's that?" And they said, "Well, they say they're going to be able to transmit papers, through the telephone line." And we're like, "Well, we got to see this." So right after lunch, this box comes in, and everybody huddles around. Everybody in the office, everybody huddles around, and they put it in. They plug it, and it's got instructions. Plug it into the phone line, and take this paper out, and it's kind of like that wax paper, it's all rolled up, and so you put it in there, and they said, Now, call us when it's ready. And so we called them, and so they call it, and it's like it answered, and it goes, and all of a sudden this paper starts rolling out like a scroll, and it rolls out, and we unrolled that. I'll never forget this. We unrolled that, and it said "test."
Yeah.
And at that point, we knew this deal was real.
Yeah.
And I never forget what I said. I said, "This is a game changer."
You're right.
And that's really when technology started.
Yeah.
I mean, to really change our lives.
Yeah.
And I tell you, that leads into what I mentioned a while ago, this AI stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just, I listen to everything I can on AI.
Yeah.
And I don't think the greatest quote I have, which I think is true, that I've heard, which I think is true, is that AI will not put you out of business. It's somebody that knows how to use AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's going to, and the thing that's unique about that is we've gone through and had a lot of changes where we've had to learn new processes and new software and stuff like that. And it's really, slows you down, right?
Yeah.
But AI is taking what we already have
Make it so much faster
and making it simpler for us, making it faster.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's some jobs that may change.
I like how it organizes my thoughts. Like I can just put in, these are my thoughts on this. Can you organize it for me? Because, and then all of a sudden you realize, even if you're like doing a property description, you just start typing everything about it, and like just organize this for me, It's pretty powerful.
I had the privilege at the end of February to go to D.C. and lobby for the Farm Bill. And so they gave us the names like the day before who we were going to go and lobby. One was Senator Cornyn, and one was Representative McCall, and then 4 other ones. And like, I didn't really know their position. So I'm calling my daughter in New York. I'm like, how am I going to do this? And she said, well, give me a second. In 5 minutes, she had gotten, into chat.
Yeah.
And it composed all of their positions and all the things that I needed to.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that is powerful. So my girls helped me with that.
That's awesome. That's good stuff.
Yeah, this is game changing. And very exciting.
Yeah, it is.
If I was getting out of school, I was talking to you college graduates. Yeah. If I was getting out of school, I'm not sure what my job, occupation would be in 5 years. So that's a little scary, but it's a changing.
For sure it is. Always got to adapt and grow and just not fall behind, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know. Exactly. I feel like, like grandparents that got on Facebook. I'm like, I want to be that grandparent one day. Whatever's changing, I want to be able to grab onto it and run with it too at the same time.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point. I was talking about my dad and my mom would always say, there's one thing about your dad is that he will accept change. He might yell and scream at first, but he'll accept change.
Adapt. Yeah.
And the Who Moved My Cheese deal, we studied that book when it came out. And I remember during one of those trainings in leadership, we had a very brilliant man from the UK that talked to us about business systems and so forth. And he said that in the future, and I think this is a true statement for forever, the people that will succeed are the people that are most willing to accept change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
I think about that all the time when we get different things that we have to, even if I don't think it's going to be something that's I'm like, I got to change.
Yeah.
I've got to do this. I might not be the first one of those mice to go, but I got to be at least the second one.
Yeah.
I got to at least be the second one.
Yeah. You always have these early adopters. And I always feel like I'm the second one too. Yeah. I'm always like watching it, right? And then I get ready to dive into it.
Yeah. I'm not the first one to buy a Tesla. I can tell you that.
Right.
No.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to talk about Capital Farm real quick. This is topic number 3. We talked about your biography. We talked about your purpose growing and all this. Mm-hmm. But Capital Farm and the 3 things they want to be a part of. So I think Phil Peabody taught me this in College Station last year, but y'all are about education, advocacy, and financing solutions for rural land. Mm-hmm. You have 600 employees.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
63 locations, 23,000 borrowers, chartered in 192 counties. Are the 8th largest farm credit in the United States and number 1 in Texas.
That's correct.
So great organization, doing a lot, but I love how y'all are focused on the 3 things, which is education, advocacy, and then the financing solutions. And so I guess if you're a listener listening to this, I mean, they educate realtors, you educate, your landowners. And what are y'all doing to educate landowners? Like, what does that look like? Educational piece.
Yeah. So, in this area, and I'm not sure, I guess they still have it, the New Landowners Conference.
Okay.
That would be one that we participate in and try to speak at. Mm-hmm. We try to be we really try to connect with the Ag Extension Service as they educate and so forth. And so we sponsor a lot of those events. And if we can, we put up booths where we can visit with people and so forth. We have a Young Beginning Small Farmer program.
Okay.
And one of the ladies that they just hired is working on her doctorate in ag education. And And so we are doing we have a large investment in trying to bring in that next generation.
Yeah.
And we have Allison Teoker is the lady that heads that up.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, they have got a great program where they're promoting, trying to anything from maybe more traditional farming that you would have, like the son or daughter, take over the family farm that's been there forever, or ranch or whatever it is, to a lot of this new agriculture where, it's farm fresh and people are coming out of the city and, or maybe it's some branded beef or whatever, a lot of people are doing that.
I don't know if you saw, but the United States just, our new Department of Health Services, whatever, I forget what it's called, but I think Trump administration just hired a new lady and all about getting our food safe again instead of I wonder how the farming industry is going to maybe change in the future with, because I know they talk a lot about the pesticides and what, our food is, a lot of people are buying stuff that's not healthy.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's going to change a little bit over time.
I think probably that food safety, the thing about agriculture in the United States is that we're the safest food product there is in the world. And so when people see our label that's made in America, they know that we have high standards. And I think they'll continue to watch things like that. They'll continue to watch what pesticides or fertilizers that we put out there. But folks that think that we can stop using pesticide or fertilize today and still feed the world, is not going to happen. We just have to find a safer way to do it all the time. And so we support the safety of our food supply.
I always eat grapes and forget to wash. My wife's always on me about it. Those aren't washed.
Yeah. I tell you, I made the mistake when we were up in Boston and we went to an apple orchard. I was just picking them off the tree and eating them. Yeah. I had no idea what they sprayed it with, but they were so good, So no, I've done the same thing. But we work a lot with our ag group that processes like whether it's beef or chicken. We work with one of the chicken processors up there quite a bit. Now that I'm down there in the valley, vegetables, and those things, you wouldn't believe the standards that they have and the safety that they have to make that a product that's safe. So I have confidence in the system. Doesn't mean that something doesn't slip through sometimes, but
I have to. Yeah.
I mean, when's the last time you thought about going to another country and you worried about
Well, I was in Mexico the other day.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
I was questioning the waiter, like, is this going to be good or not?
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. We're probably going to end here pretty quick, but I want to thank you and I want to thank Capital Farm. Y'all are a huge platinum sponsor for Texas RLI, Realtor Land Institute every year. And so thank you for y'all's investment in us. And it goes both ways, I feel like. And so, just want to thank you for that. So.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. That investment that, because we have value that's brought to our organization, by realtors and by other people, one of the things that we enjoy the most as a cooperative is to be able to support those causes that, that promotes these other industries and so forth. And so, thanks a lot.
Yeah, RLI is about knowing the land, know the ropes, and know the people like you. And so it's with people like you that make our business so much fun and better, and we're able to help our clients so much better. So thank you for that.
Great.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for listening today. We got to listen to, I think Tim's a legend in the Capital Farm credit industry. Not only that, but as a family man and all that. And so I've learned a lot from you today. Some things that I want to go work on myself. So I've always felt like you got to give up to go up in life. You got to give up here if you want to go up to the next level. And so you've done that. It seems like through your whole career, you've been a 360 leader. You've led up, you led down, you led to the sideways too. Done a tremendous job at that. And so, like you said, you always want to be CEO, but you found ways to find a platform wherever you are to lead.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, don't talk to my wife and my kids.
Yeah.
Because they might tell you about dad. But I'm getting better. Amazing what therapy does.
Right. All the same here. It's hard. Life is hard. I told my kids on the way to school the other day, I was like, getting good grades is hard.
Yeah.
Having a good marriage is hard.
Yeah. It's all work.
Yeah. And I said, it's all uphill, but it's worth it,
Yeah.
And so having great kids is worth it. Y'all are hard. I got to discipline and I got to do things I don't want to do, but you have to do them,
What in life is easy that is of value to it. Nothing's easy.
Yeah. No.
It really isn't. And I think that's the deal about, waking up every day and how you look at life. I think with me, part of it's genetic, but part of it, I do have to choose every day, even if you're kind of blessed with a good attitude, there are times when, you just got to push through it, and I know some people have a harder time than others with that. And that's what we're there for, people that, can help folks make it through that. And we have a great opportunity to do that every day, with all the people that I think one of the things I pray for every day is let me go out and help the world and give me the wisdom to know when I'm supposed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Don't let me pass that opportunity up. As I get older, I know that I pass those opportunities. Somebody says something and you don't follow up with it. Man, I should have said something. So I try to be a little bit better about that now,
Yeah. I want to end with that quote. Before we started, guys, Tim and I kind of visited and he talked about this river quote.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that I got it right.
I took notes on it. I put it in my phone already.
I can paraphrase it. And I told you the story about my dad.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah. Okay. I want to make sure I say it exactly right. I used this at a retirement party for one of my good friends that graduated from Farm Credit. But when I was a young man, 17 or 18 years old, before I went to college, and I just really didn't know, where that life was taking me. I said, Dad, maybe I want to stay here, and I want to be, I want to be on the farm, stay close by, and be in the cattle business. He says, boy, if you want to save this farm, he said, you go out and get a job and you can always come back. Mm-hmm. And so I do go back. I still, our family farm's been in the family, I think 117 years.
It's in Burleson County.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 117 years. And so this quote always means a lot to me. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he is not the same man. Mm-hmm. And I think about that, and I think about going back to that farm after I finished that career. And, it's really interesting how different the many things that I've been exposed to in life. Yeah. And if I would have never left there, I would have never seen that river that different, at the end of my career and stuff. Yeah. I think about one other thing, and I know we need to close up, but when I raised my daughters, I said I raised them with wings. Yeah. Like I raised them to fly. Yeah. And oh my gosh, my oldest daughter that's in New York working for this company up there, she came home and she was called me and she was crying on the freeway. Going to the third interview. Yeah. And I said, she goes, Dad, they're going to offer me a job. And I said, well, why are you crying? Yeah. She goes, because Dad, that's not what I want to do. I want to go back to New York. And I said, to work for, the company that you interned with? And she goes, yeah, Dad, I want to go back and work there. I said, well, did they offer you a job? No, but I know somebody. And I said, well, where would you live? She goes, well, I know somebody. And I said, you would leave a job like the job that I would think would be a dream job in Houston. Yeah. I said, you would leave that job for this pie in the sky? Yeah. And oh my God, if your daughters do this to you, you'll know what I'm talking about. She goes, Dad, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it.
Yeah. You taught them how to fly.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I said, good Lord. I said, okay, I'm going to have to handle all these people that are going to go crazy when I tell them you're going there without a job, without a place to stay. And she goes, yeah, Dad, I know. I said, well, tell those people you don't want that job in Houston and give those people in New York a call and try to find yourself a job.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's the way I feel about life. That, we were meant to fly. We were meant to find those platforms that we need to stand on.
Yeah. So. That's powerful. Thank you so much for today, brother. Love it. Thank you so much. All right, guys. You can catch us at Entre.real estate. We're on Spotify, podcast, YouTube. And thank you again for Tim today with Capital Farm for this awesome interview. And we'll take a picture to update this one from, I think, from 12 years ago. And thank you for all you do. Like I said, we're very appreciative of you and your time today.
Yeah. Well, you do a great thing with your message that you get out there. I always admire you. That's why I try to find you in a crowd and talk to you. And I cherish our friendship, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. You have a great day. Thank you all for listening, and share this episode with your friends. Appreciate it.
Thank you.